Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aardvark Accessibility Podcast. This is our 11th episode, and here with us today is me, Natalie G, an accessibility novice and your mic MC. And with us today is
Natalie Maclees, accessibility expert. Natalie Mac.
yes, Natalie Mac, otherwise known as Natalie Mac. All right. In today's episode, we're going to talk about assistive technology. And no, it's not just screen readers. So, what is assistive technology, Natalie?
Assistive technology is any kind of technology that helps people accomplish tasks.
And it doesn't have to be a device.
It doesn't have to be a device. Things like glasses and contact lenses, crutches, walkers, etc. Would also count as assistive technologies.
Would you say features could be considered assistive technology?
Sometimes, yep.
So, any tool, device, contraption, including glasses, could be an
Including
assistive.
glasses. Yeah.
And in this episode, we want to focus mainly on the digital world, right?
Yes, we're going to talk about mostly websites, even. Yeah. Even narrower than that.
Yes. So, when talking about making websites accessible, there is a lot of different devices we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, there's lots of different people with lots of different capacities, lots of different abilities, and using lots of different kinds of assistive technology to look at the websites we built.
And WCAG does its best to cover a lot of them.
It does its best. It's not perfect.
Really?
There's always more that you could do, yes.
Okay. Is that where your best practices come into play?
Yeah, there's some additional best practices that are pretty commonly accepted in addition to the WCAG guidelines. And then there's also just testing with your own users because they might have their own set of preferences for your specific audience.
Would you say that users that use the same assistive device even have their own unique preferences to using a
Oh,
website?
yeah, definitely. Screen readers, for example, have dozens of settings. So you can't even count on a screen reader always acting the same way. They can be configured and personalized just the way that somebody likes to use it.
All right. Do you want to dive into breaking down the different types of assistive technology and how websites typically accommodate them?
Yeah, how you can make your website work better for them.
Yes.
All right. We're going to start with a visual impairment, which visual impairment includes, of course, being blind, but also having impaired vision of some kind, anywhere from very mild, where maybe you just need reading glasses, to pretty severe. And can also include things like color blindness, right, is a vision impairment. So, all right, assistive technology that would typically be used by someone with visual impairment, screen readers, of course. And to get your website to work with a screen reader, you want to use semantic HTML. You want to make sure that everything is marked up in a clear way so that its role on the page can be determined by that screen reader. We have screen magnifiers, which can increase the size of whatever is on the screen. And this can get very intense, like sometimes with just a few letters or a couple of words on a pretty big monitor at a time, so that it is readable to somebody who has, a pretty profound vision impairment. But those are very useful. You want to make sure that your design can be resized easily, that it reflows if it's a responsive website. That's a good start. And you want to avoid putting text inside of images because that's going to get distorted when it magnifies. So you want to use real text and make your font size adjustable and make sure that you're testing to make sure that that works. We also have Braille, refreshable Braille displays, Braille keyboards, and things like that. And those are basically the same things that would make your website work with a screen reader, will make it work with a refreshable Braille display. There is voice command software. Somebody who cannot see where the mouse cursor is on the screen obviously isn't going to get a lot of use out of a mouse. So being able to talk to their computer or their mobile device and tell the device what they want, they're able to get a lot further that way if they can just say, click the button that says buy now. And then they can check out. It's super easy. Tools for ensuring that you have enough color contrast ratio, and then providing a way for people to switch to like an even higher contrast mode if they want to. Of course, there's also, desktop software that will enable that for them as well. And then you could also, if you have a map or some kind of a graphic, you can provide that in a printable format so that if somebody has like a tactile printer, they could print it out and then feel the design. So there's printers that will, emboss or like layer on, almost like 3D printing on paper so that it is tactile and you can feel it and kind of get an idea of what a design or a map or something like that might look like.
And not every user with visual impairments is going to use all of those.
No, they'll probably have one or two that they prefer to use
Mm-hmm.
and can get really good at, right? You don't want to learn 50 different technologies if you don't have to. Yeah. You want to learn one or two and get really good at them.
Mm-hmm. Some of these are more specialized than others, right? Like the tactile printers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's obviously going to be an expense that not everybody can afford, unfortunately. So just something to keep in mind if you are doing something that is highly visual, like a way that you could maybe make that a little bit more accessible for more people.
While some of these other ones are super common. Screen readers,
Yeah.
color
Screen
contrast.
readers are super common. Yeah, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but people with vision impairment aren't the only ones that use screen readers.
Okay. Do you want to go into the next batch or the next bucket? How do
The
we say that? The next category.
next category. There you go. Next, we have hearing impairments. And of course, not all websites have some kind of sound. So, but if you do, you want to make sure that that sound is accessible. So if you're providing videos or audio files, you would want to make sure that you're providing captions or transcripts or both, because somebody might have a preference from one over the other. If you are doing phone calls and you have somebody with a hearing impairment who might want to call, you could use a video relay service for that call so that they could have a sign language interpreter to help them out to understand what you're saying and to communicate back to you. Of course, we all know about hearing aids, cochlear implants, and things of that nature that can just help to take sound from the world and get it into somebody's brain in one way or another. And there's also assistive listening devices, which there's a whole variety of those devices that can do different things. So sometimes they're like a text to speech that might connect to somebody's phone and, turn what they're listening to into speech. Other times they might like connect to their hearing aid to help them focus, like in a college classroom, for example, if you have a bunch of jerk students who are in the class with you who like to talk over the teacher. You could use one of these devices to help amplify just the teacher's voice for you so that you weren't distracted by students and things like that.
What kind of things should websites do to help with hearing devices?
For if you have video or audio on your website, you want to make sure that that content is available in another format. So captions or transcripts is going to be the easiest way to provide that. But if you have the budget, what's really, really nice to be able to do is to provide sign language interpretation of that content. And the reason for that is that for many people who are deaf, sign language is their first language. And if you've ever learned a little bit of ASL, if you're in the United States, ASL, you know that the grammar and things is different than spoken English. And so sometimes it can take a little bit longer and it's a little bit more work to actually read printed English as opposed to being able to ingest that content through ASL is easier and faster. So if you have the budget to be able to provide that with ASL, it's always a great idea to do that.
And do you want to go over what a video phone is? Because I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, before we all had Zoom, and I think almost made this technology completely unnecessary. Yeah, there were video phones where you could call, and it was like a little, a little old fashioned CRT TV. I think they're still around, and they obviously would use a newer type of screen, but and you could see somebody on the screen speaking sign language, and they could see you speaking sign language, and you could have a call that way. Those TDD phone services as well, where it's to text. It's like a relay call. Like you connect to an interpreter, and then that person calls, the company or whatever you're trying to call, and then they're in between you, right? And the person with hearing impairment is typing on one end, and then the relay is reading that to the company, and then the company representative speaks, and the relay types that back to the person with hearing impairment. So that technology's been around for a long time too.
Okay. It's called TDD.
Yeah, TDD.
Yeah, I think these days it's been mostly replaced by FaceTime.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, now we have nicer technologies. We have FaceTime, we have Zoom, we have all kinds of video calling, and yeah.
Is it pretty common for stuff to kind of go out of date and then new technology to come in?
Yeah, just like anything else. We have all different kinds of technology. It's also really common for assistive technology to become commonplace for everybody to use. Things like typewriters were originally invented so that people with vision impairment could write letters.
Oh, is this a fact?
Yeah, we could probably put a link in the show notes because there's lots of articles online about 20 things you use every day that were originally assistive technology.
Oh, okay, cool. I will. I'll
Yeah.
look for something like that and link it then.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into the next category?
Sure. Next, we have mobility impairments. And when we're talking about websites, it would mainly be mobility or fine motor control issues with your hands and arms. And there's all kinds of things that you can use if you have this kind of challenge, which could be maybe you just broke your arm. It's the middle of winter. Maybe you slipped on the ice and broke your arm. You might not even know. There's stuff that can help you out so you could use your computer better. So there's all different kinds of keyboards and mice for all different kinds of situations. So if there's some part of your hands and arms that you can move at least a little bit, there's probably a keyboard or a mouse for your specific situation. You'll be all set. Eye tracking software where you can control a computer just by looking at things. You could click a button just by looking at it. There is speech to text where you can talk instead of having to type. You could say out loud your email that you want to send to somebody and send that with just using your voice without having to use, your hands or arms. Head pointers and mouth sticks. So different devices that attach to your head, basically, so that you could use your head instead of your hands and arms. And then there is almost an infinite number of different kinds of switch devices that you could work with your feet, with your cheek, with your tongue, with your with anything on your body that you can move, basically. There is a switch device available that you could use instead of a mouse or keyboard. To enable you to get through a website, type up emails, write a book, whatever you want to do.
And what kind of stuff do websites need to make sure to implement so that it works with all these devices?
They need to make sure that their website works with keyboard only. That's the main thing. And very often doesn't happen. So if you're building a website, put your mouse on the other side of the room and try to use your website with just your keyboard. If you can do that, it will probably work okay with one of these technologies.
Even the Switch devices, all of them?
Yep, even the Switch devices. Yeah. All those different devices, they all look very different, and the way that you operate them is very different. But as far as the computer is concerned, that's just a mouse or a keyboard that you just plugged in. It doesn't even know that it's not.
I see. And so a lot of people with mobility impairments, do they use a combination of these? Like, if you have a Switch device, how do you type in like words and letters?
There's on-screen keyboards that you can navigate
Mm,
with those. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of devices have that built in now, like an on-screen keyboard that you can bring up and use if you want.
okay.
Um,
So like
yeah.
a touchscreen phone.
Yeah, yeah. You could turn your laptop into a touchscreen phone, basically.
I
Yeah.
see. I see.
If you have the ability to move probably more than one part of your body, you probably would switch between these because just like anything, right? Like whatever you're using is going to get tired. I used to read a blog by a woman who called herself the left thumb blogger because that's all she could move reliably on her body was her left thumb. And she wrote all these wonderful long blog posts all the time and was very active on social media. But, she had technology that helped to make that doable.
Yeah. And the other thing too is making your website easily navigatable. Navigable? Navigable?
Navigable. Yeah.
Okay, I don't like that.
Yes.
Easily navigable and as little text as possible.
Yes. Easy to skip to your main content. Yeah, things like that. Like really easy to get around. Not a lot of extra stuff that's getting in the way. Not a lot of sign up for my newsletter pop ups showing up every 2 minutes.
Oh yeah, because they have to close them.
Yeah.
That's
It's
so
like
painful.
everybody's got to close that and nobody wants.
Do not make your website like a 2005 search engine
Don't do that.
before Google.
We've learned so much. There were so many mistakes made on the web early on. We've learned so much about how to build good websites now.
Yeah, I guess when the internet first started, accessibility was there was none basically.
No, nobody thought of that at first. Yeah. And ironically, it was less of a big deal because when the web first started, we just had HTML. We didn't have CSS or JavaScript. And HTML by itself is pretty accessible.
It's the styling and all the other
Yeah.
actions.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's often all the other stuff that we do that gets in the way of that.
Okay, if you had a button to go back to the old, just HTML style websites across the entire world and internet, would you press it? You wouldn't?
No. Oh, you want me to like go back in time and suddenly tell everybody that they have to make their websites accessible?
No, I'm saying like right here, right now, with what websites and everything we have right now.
Yeah.
Press a button and we simplify the entire web to HTML only. Would you do
I
it?
mean, that is basically how a significant number of people experience the web already who are using assistive technology.
Oh, they strip all the other stuff?
Well, something like a screen reader isn't telling you that text is bright green and 42 pixels, right? So you're just getting that HTML content.
I see. Okay, so your answer is no.
You should be
I,
able to. You should be able to because that is how a lot of people are going to experience your website. So you should absolutely load it up in a browser and turn off all of your CSS and JavaScript and see what you've got. It should make sense. It should be navigable.
yes. I would press the button. I would want to see chaos ensue.
You want to get rid of all the CSS and JavaScript?
On the web.
Building a website would get a lot easier.
H1 open. My website. H1 close. All right. Next category.
All right, we've only got a couple left. So we have cognitive disabilities. And for people with cognitive disabilities, you can provide some kind of a simplified user interface, distraction free mode, keep navigation very simple and easy. That is helpful for everybody. Honestly, we're all very busy, we're stressed, we're doing things on the go. So these things are helpful for people with cognitive disabilities, but they're helpful for everybody um, at the pace we're living life these days. For people who have dyslexia or learning disabilities, being able to modify fonts and put them in a typeface that they might prefer is always really helpful. And then you can use noise canceling headphones to help you focus, block out all the noise around you, especially if you're in an open office environment, right? Like, again, like even if you don't have a cognitive disability, you might want to take advantage of these kinds of technologies just to help you out, because there's a lot of distractions happening in a lot of workplaces all the time. And then the last disability group that we have that's impacted, or has their use of the web impacted, I guess, would be vestibular and seizure disorders. And the thing that you want to do to accommodate this group is to respect the prefers reduced motion setting in their browsers. So there is a browser setting. So if you have issues with seeing lots of motion on websites and you don't know about this, there is a setting in your browser that you can say, I prefer reduced motion. The trick is that people building websites have to check for that. So you have to build your website in a way that if you are going to build a CSS spinning animation, for example, you can use a media query to check to see if prefers reduced motion is enabled, and then not do the animation if that option is enabled. You can also check that option in JavaScript and make sure that you're not automatically playing videos, automatically playing different kinds of animations and movement on the pages if that preference is turned on in the browser. Because of course we can, by having lots of motion on a page, you can make somebody sick, you can make somebody physically ill, they could be nauseated, they could be dizzy, they could have a seizure, they could faint or pass out. So you could cause some serious harm to somebody by not respecting those settings. So you want to be very conscious of that and use motion and animation very judiciously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not saying that you can't put animation, because if there's ways to respect the setting.
Respect the setting. You can also make it so it doesn't play by default, so that a user has to click a play button if they want to see it. If you absolutely have to make it run by default, it needs to have a very clear, easy to find stop or pause button so that people who don't want that moving can very quickly disable it if they need to. But the preferred thing to do would be to not have it moving by default and to let the users who do want to see it hit a play button and start it happening.
All right. Natalie, do you want to wrap up? Where do we go if we want to help make our websites accessible?
You go to aardvarkaccessibility.com. It's free to do on your homepage. Scan your homepage. You can try out our manual testing tools on your homepage. We have education built right into the tool to help you figure out how to fix any issues that you find.
Yes. And with that, thank you for joining us today. Everyone, go subscribe to our podcast, Aardvark Accessibility Podcast, wherever you're listening to, and we'll join you next time for the next episode of the Aardvark Accessibility Podcast.
See you next time.
See ya. And now for our YouTube viewers who get to witness us making our thumbnails, here we go. A very special pose for today. We're going to do for our 11th episode.
11.
Stick our fingers.
Do I have to do it like this on each side of my face?
I don't know.
11.
Alrighty, that wraps up this episode. And cut.